Hi, I'm Sarah Wilder. This is episode part 36B. This is the conclusion of Awful October 2022. It's a story about when I get my very first apartment since leaving Jim. And this will be the first time I've lived alone since 1983, so it's kind of a big deal. I thank you for being here. So, about the same time that trailer shopper Pam came to be, I rented an apartment in Federal Heights in Salt Lake City. This is about a block from the U of U. It was in a beautiful neighborhood, really, really nice. I chose this building for a few reasons. Not only was it really beautiful and historic and in the most perfect location ever, absolutely magical, in fact, but I deemed it safe for my needs. You needed a digital code to get in the front door or the side door, also to get in even to the parking lot, and then another code to get into the inner door. And then also every apartment door had the digital keypad entry and also a manual key. So I really liked that. And it happened to be the street behind my apartment was 1.5 miles straight west to Rachel's apartment. So we were just one little short drive from each other. And sometimes we'd meet up and I'd go for a walk with her in her end of the avenues, or she'd come to my house, which was right across the street from a big, really old turn of the century city park, and we'd walk around that. So it was just a really fun location for the two of us. Unfortunately, though, I couldn't have both my dogs. I could only keep the little one, Dolly, so Rosie needed to be rehomed. So that was kind of a bummer. It made me sad. But it was ended up better for everyone, especially Rosie. One of the drawbacks of this apartment, and I've described how great it is, well, because of all those reasons, it was expensive. The rent on this basement apartment, and I think it's about 910 square feet, which was more than the house payment on the townhome. So it was a bit of a pinch. And that's how I became a Door Dasher. However, a benefit of it was Rachel and I no longer had to go to the laundromat, which got to be pretty expensive. The other thing that I really loved about this building that I really didn't love about all the apartments in my price range, this building was mold free. It was by far the cleanest building I'd ever been in. So I signed the lease in the middle of October, but like I said, because I could only have one of my pets, I needed to rehome Rosie. She really fit in beautifully with Becca's family and her kids, and honestly completed the family, because Rosie and Dolly and I spent the entire summer of 2022 with Becca and her family. So for Rosie to be reunited with Becca, her family, especially those kids, and their dog, was just the best thing for everyone. After I did that, which was over Halloween 2022, after that, I started sleeping overnight in my apartment. And so it was then that I did notice a few things that I needed the landlady's help with. And I found that she really wasn't there to help. She wasn't there for me to help. I don't know how the other people in the building experienced her, but I'm telling you, the level of hostility and vitriol that this woman leveled at me was shocking. I had not been treated this way by another woman since my mother in law. And it was confusing and upsetting because initially I was very, very excited to have found the apartment, the location, proximity to everything I was doing, proximity to Rachel especially, and it just fit with my aesthetic. I set up house, I was playing house, it was really cute. I missed my things, and it was cool to have just some alone space. But I lived there for 5 months, and the entire time she was never nice to me. This woman seemed to have a bottomless cistern of roiling anger. I would find out some months later from psychic medium Peter why she was that way. It didn't make me feel any better. My landlady was, I guess, in her early 70s. She was a former Mormon tabernacle choir pianist, and she still traveled around the globe a bit playing piano. I had such respect for her for that because she was an extremely accomplished musician. Um, One thing I didn't appreciate, however, was how she worked it into every conversation that all of her children, I don't know how many, 6 or 7, had gone to BYU and Harvard, and they were all doctors and lawyers. And she was pretty gross. To back it up a little bit, before she started with the hostilities, and this was in the weeks before I spent time there full time, she was warm and friendly and welcoming. And she even shared with me that she had sold her home not too far from the apartment building. She also lived next to the U of U campus, where her husband was a very long time professor in the medical school. So this woman actually relocated from Salt Lake City to American Fork, and I was relocating from American Fork to Salt Lake City, and we had a giggle over that. And she shared with me that she had a son there. She moved there to be near them, but also he was a realtor with Redfin in American Fork. And I was shopping for a realtor. I was struggling with Jim over getting him to sign a listing agreement, and we'd already talked about that. So I went ahead and I agreed to hire landlady's son in American Fork. And he seemed okay at first. But the reason why I mention this at this point in the video is because what happened next, I've talked about the hostility. What I think happened is Jim filled this realtor's head full of the narcissistic propaganda. You know how it goes. I'm the crazy one. I am a liar. I'm untrustworthy, which to say that to other Mormon people, deeply Mormon people, signals very loudly that I am a bad person. You don't want to be around me. I'm a poor influence. I'm a person of a low quality and of bad character. That's how people like my landlady and her son, a lot of Utah people, not most, but a lot of Utah people will read that. And Jim knew what he was doing. So I think that the kinds of things that she was doing to me stems from her son believing what Jim fed him full of. Because here's why. The things she would say to me in text messages and that used the same language, some things verbatim, what I know Jim had said to other people, not to me directly, but I'm hearing, like I heard from the movers that moved me into this apartment, some of the vitriol that Jim spewed to the movers when they went to take payment for my move over the phone, because yes, I made him pay for my move, were the same things, word for word, that landlady was saying in text messages to me. And yes, she wouldn't talk on the phone. I could only text her. So that told me that there was a script Jim was using to badmouth me anytime he had access to someone who was doing something for me. And I'm sure this is all super familiar to many of you out there. My first time going through it. So it was tumultuous. It should have been a cool, cute, hey man, look at me. I'm 61 years old and I've got my own apartment, yada, yada. But nah, right away it was another battle. Jim had set the tone and I had to swim upstream and fight tooth and nail for every minute of peace I had in that building. Okay, there were a couple things that happened that triggered the landlady. So now I'm going to get to the things that triggered her initially. So when the moving day happened and I was putting my things in the apartment, I was told by her that a sleeper sofa would definitely fit in that unit. So I brought one. I wasn't originally going to take it. I didn't tell Jim I was taking it. I didn't ask for it, but it didn't matter. He didn't use that upstairs living room anyway. He had moved everything into the basement like a subterranean insect. Everything was hoarded from the top floor all the way he moved into the bottom floor. So anyway, I knew he wasn't going to use it, and I took it. We got to the apartment, it didn't fit. So it ended up just sitting in the hallway for 3 days. And I'm telling you what, boy, did I hear it. I heard all kinds of stuff from her about it. So the next thing she told me was that was wrong, was I needed to pay the rent by the final day of the previous month. So for December 1st rent, I had till the 5th of December. No. She told me I had to pay it by November 30th. And I had to pay by handing her a check or cash. I was not allowed to use any of the digital payment platforms. I got out the lease, I read the lease, and I quoted it to her in a text message. That she was creating problems for me. She was poking me with thorns, doing everything she could. But you know something? I'm a fighter. You all know that by now. Jim certainly was learning it. I am a fighter. Don't come for me. All right, now about the first time I actually needed her help. This was help with locking myself out. I hadn't memorized the code to the door yet. I went and took a bunch of moving boxes to the dumpster outside. I was in my pajamas and it had started snowing and I was locked out. So I texted her. I had my phone in my pocket. I texted her and she said she couldn't be bothered. She was in church and she didn't have the time and she didn't have a handyman available. These were mostly lies. because a tenant who saw me sitting outside my doorway said, there is a handyman. He lives very close by. He comes to the building all the time, especially for people getting locked out, which happens. And he works on Sundays. The last thing I'll share with you, and it was really the most bizarre thing I think she did. So like I said, I was in this basement apartment. So I exited my apartment, made my left turn. And before I even lifted my head to look at the lobby area to make my turn to go out of the building, she was standing in the middle of the apartment area and had started bellowing at me, yelling at me to get out of her apartment building. She wanted me out. She screamed that her building is only for people who can afford to live there and that I needed to get out. So I yelled back at her as I walk right by her. I'm walking right by her, got my purse on. I said, you know something? Several weeks ago, when I rented it and signed the lease, my money was as green as everybody else's, and you took it with a smile. So you can keep it, put it in your pocket, or you could choke on it. I don't care which. She was still screaming, and she was saying, immediately, vacate this building immediately. I turned and I called her an absolutely unacceptable, venomous name, because by this point, I was a Roman candle. I called her a nasty, rotted, fake Mormon. See you next Tuesday. And then I left. I walked out. I just really love the irony in that my house that I was selling, that her son was selling for me, was mere blocks from her McMansion. Yet I was odious white trash. Look, all that stood between my house and her house was the high school for little baby Mormon Republicans, and across the street, the Timpanogos Temple. That's how far apart we were. So as 2 of the hardest months of my life were behind me, and Rosie was safe and happy in her big, beautiful new home in Chicago, I sat alone in my shame and fear from the total chaos that had reigned. And then I placed a familiar phone call. So please stay tuned for my next episode for part 37, when I share with you a reading with Peter.